Ford invested millions in machines that mechanized most of the jobs on the moving assembly line. And while the production technique revolutionized manufacturing, workers hated it.
It's boring, it's regimented, it's monotonous.
It was very difficult to keep a lot of workers in these factories when they first started the moving assembly line.
In the need for speed, highly skilled workers were replaced by lower-paid, unskilled workers, asked to perform simple tasks over and over and over again.
Labor leader reported the comment of a Ford auto worker as saying, if I have to put on nut number 86 more times, I will be nut number 86 in the Pontiac bug house. Work became degraded.
Ford believed that mass production on an assembly line didn't require workers to think so much as it required them to keep pace with the machines.
A foreman in the Ford engine assembly plant talked about how in his shop, after they introduced line production, what he would do is he'd turn up the speed of the line a notch, and the workers would move faster, turn it up another notch, turn it up another notch, and then the workers would scream and he'd turn it back one notch. They said we used to get 10, 15 more machines a day by doing that.
Workers folded under the pressure. Turnover reached 380% by the end of 1913, and absenteeism was so frequent it became known as Forditis. In essence, the unskilled workers had become as interchangeable on the assembly line as the parts themselves.
Ford once said every part followed a predetermined place through the plant. If you had a person missing from that particular place, the whole system stopped. The Ford plant had 14,000 workers. With a 10% absentee rate, you have to have 1,400 extra workers to fill the assembly lines.
People didn't want to do these jobs, and it required the bait of considerable increase in wages to keep people in those factories.
Ford's response to the growing labor crisis made him a hero. He doubled assembly line wages to $5 a day and shortened the workday from 9 hours to 8. By 1914, the assembly line worker made 5 times more than the average American, whose annual income was an estimated $334. The assembly line worker could now afford to buy the Model T he was building.
It worked. Turnover dropped, absenteeism dropped, and Ford workers, sort of traded the high wages for the rotten work.
With the mechanical assembly line setting the pace, Ford enjoyed unparalleled success throughout the first 2 decades of the 20th century. In 1919, the assembly line helped make him the first billionaire.
The assembly line has brought wealth and bounty, not just to Ford and Ford's workers, but also to Americans in general.
There is perhaps no greater symbol of wealth and bounty than the monumental River Rouge complex in Dearborn, Michigan. Opened in 1918, many considered the plant to be Henry Ford's industrial masterpiece, the embodiment of mass production and the assembly line technique on an epic scale. 75,000 workers tended 53,000 machines along more than 30 miles of conveyor belts, making it the largest assembly line in the world. They manufactured their own glass, steel, and coke for smelting. By 1928, a complete automobile from raw materials to finished product took only 4 days.
I think what happens through the 1920s is that the line and the line speed and the regime of work in the factory becomes harder, faster, more ruthless.
But the Rouge factory was a magnet for mechanically minded young men fueled by fresh opportunity. Roosevelt Ford hopped a freight train north from Mississippi after he heard that the auto companies were hiring. In 1921, Roosevelt went to work for Ford. As a skilled laborer, he helped set up, maintain, and repair assembly lines at the Rouge complex.
Back in the days when he was a millwright, Ford Motor Company was the only company in the Big Three that had any blacks in skilled trades.
As a skilled laborer, Roosevelt Ford served as an inspiration to his family. So much so that 4 generations went on to work at the Rouge Complex. Seen here at a recent reunion, the family has a total of 300 years of automotive assembly experience. Strong and proud, they've not only survived, but thrived in the harsh reality of life on the assembly line.
It's a lot of pressure on you. I feel a lot of pressure.
Repetitive motion and strenuous standing up all day, I believe that's the hardest part, because it wears your body out.
The line is going to run in space. You have to catch on.
And I don't think you really get the feel of this, even though you can look at people doing it, unless you've done it yourself. You really don't understand.
All of the Fords agree that while today's assembly line is different from those in Roosevelt's day, he still helped to prepare them for the job.
He used to tell us some of the stories about some of the things that went on before the union got into the shop.
If the production line was stopped for any reason, it was like an investigation, and it was nothing for a person to be fired, to lose their job, if they were found to be at fault. Prior to the union, if a person was seen spitting on the floor or smoking a cigarette, they could lose their job.
You had to take a little bit of everything. You got out there and did it. You could have been tired, you could be sick, but you had to produce.
I came across an account of a woman who said that, you know, my husband is not even allowed to leave to go to the toilet. They have a trough in the work area where he goes to urinate.
By 1929, cars were coming off Ford assembly lines at the rate of 1 every 10 seconds, a pace so prolific it would ultimately lead labor to organize against it.
One of the early demands of the union is that the box which controlled the speed of the line would have 2 keys, and that both workers and management would control one of the keys. So, I mean, in some sense, what unionization is about is to try to stop and slow down that speed up.
While control of line speed would become a cornerstone in the contentious and continuing battle between labor and management, one thing about the assembly line was certain.
First of all, it was a job. I had a job. The assembly line did a lot for a lot of people. It was a phenomenal thing, I guess is the best way for me to put it.
15 million Model Ts were built on Ford assembly lines.